Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, as a follow-up to yesterday's video, why I left MSNBC, today I touch on life after MSNBC. My determination to try to talk and listen across the Great Divide. As I mentioned yesterday, I left MSNBC because I felt like I was just preaching to the converted, and I was determined to do something different. So I decided to offer myself up to any and all conservative media outlets to talk about the importance of the rule of law from the perspective of a 30-year federal prosecutor. And along those lines, trying to walk the walk, I accepted an invitation to speak at a conservative conference in Washington, D.C. this upcoming weekend. It's an organization called Principles First, and here is just a very short blurb about that organization, its mission, its goals, how it came about. In 2019, principled Americans on the right and center right who were concerned about the health of American democracy organized a series of meetups around the country to serve as an alternative to the Conservative Political Action Conference, CPAC. Today, that movement has grown into Principles First. And this weekend's conference, or Principles First Summit, as it's called, include folks like Mark Cuban, Lisa Murkowski, Jared Polis, Chris Christie, John Bolton, George Conway, Michael Luttig, Adam Kinzinger, Asa Hutchinson, and others. You get the picture. Lots of longtime Republicans and a small smattering of Democrats, myself included. So after I was invited to speak at the upcoming conference, naturally, I wanted to learn a little bit more about the organization, Principles First. And so I sat down with the founder, Heath Mayo, and he explained to me how the organization started and what the organization's goals, its mission, its priorities, its principles are. And what I learned was not only interesting, but I think it's actually encouraging. You know, we're always looking for points of light amidst today's darkness. So I invite you to watch this short interview with the founder of Principles First, Heath Mayo. Hope you enjoy it. Okay, friends, welcome to another episode of Justice Matters One-on-One. I'm really excited today to talk to Heath Mayo. He is the founder of an organization called Principles First, and he's going to spend some time telling us a little bit about the organization and their upcoming summit, which will be held in Washington, D.C. They graciously asked me to be one of the panel members, and I'm really looking forward to my maiden voyage participating in a Principles First Summit. So first of all, Heath, welcome. Thank you for joining us here on Justice Matters.
Thank you, Glenn. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for joining us at the summit next weekend. We're really excited about it. A lot of folks coming from all over the country, so it should be a good weekend.
Can you start off by telling us a little bit about your background and then the organization that you founded? It's my understanding, Principles First. Talk a little bit about what the mission and what the goals of Principles First is.
I guess first on myself, I'm a corporate attorney here in New York City by trade. That's my professional background is in the law. I went to law school, spent some time as a management consultant at Bain & Company in Boston for a bit, but now practice law full time. But the Principles First Summit is sort of a passion project of mine, and not just me, but a lot of other people around the country. And that started about 5 years ago in 2019. I was, since I can remember in college, all the way up through was sort of just a card-carrying conservative Republican. I grew up in East Texas, and it was the way I was raised: conservative principles, limited government, personal responsibility, and really, admired, Republican presidents like Reagan, George H.W. Bush and even George W. Bush, admired the history of the Republican Party going all the way back to Lincoln. And, as we've seen since 2016, things have kind of gone off the rails. And, I think a lot of folks in 2019 were frustrated. And, I had gone to CPAC since I was young. And, over the years, it, like the Republican Party, had become this sort of grift show with just anybody and everybody who would say whatever crazy thing that was the hot topic of the day. They just throw them on the stage and everybody would go nuts. And it just wasn't a serious place for people to talk about the challenges that the country faces. So that's where Principles First started, I think. It was just initially just sort of a therapy group, honestly, among sort of disgruntled Republicans, conservatives that were frustrated with the direction of the party. And that was in 2019. We did our first summit at the press club. It was about, maybe 200, 300 people got together. And we've just been at it ever since because, things have only gotten worse, honestly, in the Republican Party. And now the project, it's focused on getting politics back to a principles first mentality rather than these personalities and, even party driven politics where people just throw on a jersey and they don't even know why they're doing it. They're just on a team and the underlying principles and ideas don't really matter. The idea of Principles First is to put the focus back on those principles so that we can really talk about the challenges that the country faces sort of outside of the partisan bubble that really dominates the headlines and the media every day. So we're excited. I mean, the energy on the ground is there. I mean, we've sold out now. This will be our largest summit ever. And people are coming all around the country to have the discussion. So we're really, really excited.
Yeah, and I was looking at Principles First website and was looking at the 15 principles that are laid out there. And they involve things like, number one, integrity, character, and virtue matter. Number two, every person has dignity, quality, and worth. Number three, truth, honesty, rationality, and facts are non-negotiable. Number four, one of my personal favorites, the Constitution and the rule of law are paramount. And there are 11 more. So when I'm looking at these principles and a little bit of the explanations, this kind of looks like it could be a combination of a history class and a civics course and an ethics class. None of this should be surprising. I mean, this kind of feels like how I lived my life growing up. I grew up kind of in a conservative household, but we didn't really do politics. Heck, my pop was a high school football coach. We did football, wrestling, boxing, beer. That's the kind of stuff we did. Yeah. Politics was not front and center. And I myself have voted for Republicans. I voted for Democrats and I voted for independents. But we are now in a time when one of the two major political parties, in my view, seems to have lost its mind. One of the things that I'm going to throw out to you is, as we look at where the Republican Party has been, where it is now with respect to just sort of worshiping at the altar of Donald Trump, you do have people like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger who, by all accounts, put principle first. And Heath, I would ask you, how is it, you're a longtime Republican, that there are only two people like that who have vocally stood up and flexed their patriotic muscle and, cared more about our democracy than they care about their own reelection prospects?
It really is sad, Glenn. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why I think, once Trump had won the nomination, this go around after January 6th, I was out. And I think similarly to Liz and Adam, I don't know how they identify today, but I know a lot of people who were in that camp are sort of saying, this project is over. The Republican Party has sort of made its choice. But it's concerning. It's sad. I mean, I think it goes to this idea that so many of our politicians today they're just not serious people. They're there for all the wrong reasons. They're there to get famous, to become famous or get, a podcast gig or whatever it is, and not to be effective in the halls of Congress. I mean, they a lot of them don't even have long careers in law enforcement or intelligence or anything. They just kind of jump onto the scene and then they get there. And so I think it is, those are the incentives that we've created in the party, and particularly the Republican Party. It's go along, get along, don't ask questions, and ride Trump's coattails. And when you do that, you get sort of the chaos that we see of, just absolute incompetence in some of the most important roles in the government. I don't know that it's going to get better in the Republican Party. I'm not optimistic. I think it's going to take a external disruptor force, because the Democratic Party's got its own problems. Clearly, I mean, they, losing in November to this guy again, it's time for some kind of disruption, some new ideas. And unfortunately, like you say, these basic ideas, these principles that you read off, have become political in some ways because they are now up for debate again. The thing, these core principles that made America so successful over the 20th century, and even before that, I mean, they're now being questioned in ways that are really concerning for, I think, a lot of folks. We'll see. But, I still hope that a majority of Americans out there recognize the genius of America is sort of these liberal principles of respecting your neighbor, equality under the law, accountability under the law, the things that you mentioned. And so that's the effort at Principles First, is to test and see just how many of us out there still believe in those things.
Yeah, things like facts should not be open to negotiation, and the importance of things like, integrity and character really should not be open for debate. But here we are. So talk a little bit about, I know we have the upcoming summit. You have the upcoming summit this weekend. Is this the 4th or 5th annual summit you all have had?
Well, this will be the 5th one. We started in 2019, but then we had the pandemic hit, and so we had a little break. But so yeah, this is the fifth one.
So apart from the summit, what other action items? What else is Principles First doing to kind of push this important agenda?
It's a great question, Glenn. I mean, we're sort of a completely volunteer organization. We have one paid staff member. Finally, after 5 years, we've continued to grow. So we have, it really is volunteers that put this thing together. And so that's what really makes it special. The summit is the main thing that we do, but then we've started hosting dinners around the country where, we'll bring in a speaker or two, and we'll host basically like, I don't know if in the Republican Party, it was these Republican Lincoln Day dinners that they would host. But we've started doing these. We did one in Charleston, in Detroit, in Nashville leading up to the election. And we'll get 100, 150 folks from, wherever it is that we're going to come to these things and to just find a new home, a new political home to discuss the challenges the country's facing. I think that's a really, there's not a lot of that out there, honestly. And it's groups like, I look at groups like Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk Group, and even CPAC. I mean, the MAGA right has sort of organizations like that bring a lot of people together. I mean, they're crazy, but they bring a lot of people get together, they pack rooms, and they at least showcase energy to the wider public around whoever is on their stage. So the problem is, if you're even a reasonable person, like, Dan Crenshaw, you go to Washington, the only way that you can really, signal energy behind your ideas is to go to stages like Charlie Kirk's Turning Point USA. And so you see, good people. I think that's sort of the feedback loop you were talking about. It's like you get to Congress, you want to make a difference, but then you realize to get heard, you have to go, suck up to Charlie Kirk and say crazy things at the Turning Point Fest. So I think that's the idea. The action idea is to bring people into this tent and to create sort of a new banner of energy and just a new community for folks to start to rally, because, the ones on offer are just not getting the job done from our perspective.
So I know the summit that's coming up next week has a really impressive lineup of speakers and panelists. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
We've been incredibly fortunate and grateful to everybody who signed on, but it's just jam-packed. We're trying to fit everybody in. We've got, Mark Cuban, conversation with him will be interesting. I mean, used to be the agenda was mostly sort of principled Republicans that we were trying to highlight, but now there's just so few of them that our tent is expanding. We're starting to like challenge, I think, the partisan swim lanes quite a bit. I mean, because I think the old ones are sort of, you can wipe them off the map. I mean, I think the realignment has occurred. So it's time to start building these new coalitions. We've got Jared Polis, the governor of Colorado, who's speaking on Sunday morning. innovative governor in Denver that I think certainly challenges the MAGA populism, but also challenges some of the orthodoxies of the Democratic Party. So that'll be interesting. Lisa Murkowski, John Bolton, and we've got AG Gonzalez, the AG under Bush, who's there to talk about the rule of law. Governor Hutchinson, Chris Christie, folks who really stood for principle during the Republican primary. So just a great smattering of folks. We'll talk about the rule of law. We've got George Conway and Judge Ludig and Barbara Comstock, a great panel there, talking about the threats to the Constitution that we're seeing out of the Trump administration. We'll have your panel, I think, moderated by Asha Rangappa at Yale. Frank Figluzzi will also be joining you to talk about the threats to our intelligence agencies, the law enforcement threats, the firings that we're seeing at the FBI, and what that does to confidence in those important institutions. I think a lot of people forget the value in these institutions. Have they made mistakes before? Sure. But this all-out assault that we've seen, distrusting the people in those organizations that are, on the front lines every day, making sacrifices to keep Americans safe, that story, I think, needs to be told. And it doesn't really get told all too often. And I think it's important to have these kinds of discussions like the ones you'll be having to sort of put those things back on the radar, because the reality is America does still have a lot of threats, and those threats are only increasing from places like Iran. I mean, we had threats on the president from Iran recently. I mean, there are real threats out there, and they're only getting worse with AI and technology. So these conversations are important, and the unseriousness that we hear in our current political debate is just not worthy of a great nation. And so Principles First is the first little step to try to do a little bit of that this weekend, and then to carry on the conversation throughout the year. So
I understand that the summit is sold out this weekend.
It is. There's still a wait list. So if folks are hearing this and are interested and think they can get there, you can go to our website at principlesfirst.us and join the wait list, and we can release you a ticket. But yeah, I mean, it's packed pretty tight at the moment. We're trying to get as many people as we can in there, but we'll do our best.
Well, it's probably a good sign that a Principles First summit is sold out. Principles are trending, and that is a good thing, and goodness knows that's what our government needs now. So thank you, Heath, for being with us. Thank you again for the invite. I look forward to being on the upcoming panel and to meeting you in person and the fellow speakers and panelists. And they can find you where, Principles First?
Principlesfirst.us. Yep, that's, if you go there, you can kind of check out, you can navigate and check out the summit and see all the speakers that we'll have, the agenda for the weekend, and then join the wait list. Like I said, yeah, we're really looking forward to it. And thanks again for being there. I think it should be a great time.
Great. Thank you for joining us here on Justice Matters. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Glenn.